Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion for June 6, 2021, recorded around 3:10 p.m. Eastern Time. Taking a wide look across the tropical Atlantic this afternoon, again, we continue to monitor really nothing at this particular moment. You notice that strong upper level winds are cutting across most of the Caribbean and tropical Atlantic at this moment. So this basically prevents anything from developing and consolidating. We also have a very big push of Saharan air that is coming off of Africa and now is traversed across most of the main development region. This will impact the Lesser Antilles over the next several days and Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic and Hispaniola. And then this will eventually kind of, make its way across the Caribbean. And we will be watching for an area of disturbance to either develop here in the Caribbean or the Gulf of Mexico side or somewhere out in this region. And we'll talk about that here in a moment. But we do have two potential systems that could develop over the next several days, both of which have land impacts, and we'll talk about that there in a moment. Sea surface temperature anomaly map, last updated as of yesterday, not really seeing much of a change here. Again, the main development region continues to be above the long-term average for the most part. I mean, there is some areas here of cooler than normal anomalies. This will warm as we progress throughout the rest of the few weeks here, and certainly into the upcoming peak season. We will definitely see that start to warm. Again, this cooler than normal blob out here, this is kind of important because this is a very spatial limiter in terms of Eastern Pacific activity. And just like we've talked about over the last several days, the less upward moving air that you have over here, the more upward moving air that you have generally across this area. And something that is interesting is we've had some westerly wind bursts across this area, which have helped to warm the equatorial Pacific. However, over the next several weeks, we'll be seeing a return to easterly wind bursts, and this will likely once again return the ENSO state to kind of a cool neutral look. So we'll take a look at that over the next several weeks and kind of see how that ends up comparing to today's map. So we'll kind of save that, and then we'll come back to it over the next several weeks here. Now, kind of the bigger story today is the upper ocean heat content values. Again, this updated as of this morning. It is kind of important to kind of focus in on the Caribbean over the next several days. And again, really notwithstanding for the main development region, just because we don't have any development out there at the moment. But down across the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico region, we can certainly see that we have fairly high upper ocean heat content. And if you guys are new to this, this is basically the 26-degree isotherm at depth. And again, the higher you go in towards the right in the scale, basically anywhere from these lighter blues all the way towards these reds and oranges. The higher you go in the scale towards the right, basically the higher upper ocean heat content and the more potential energy that these tropical cyclones have to work with, basically is the best way to kind of put it here. And you can definitely tell there's a lot of heat energy down here in the Caribbean, and this one little kind of pool here this little pool here basically of some decent upper ocean heat content values, and these are associated with kind of that warm tongue of 28 degrees Celsius waters out here, and this has implications going forward in time. And also most of the Bay of Campeche and southern Gulf of Mexico is warming up quite nicely at this point and does have some upper ocean heat content to work with. It's certainly not like you see out here where there is none. So this is definitely still ample to work with, but the more you have, the higher colors, definitely the better in this type of environment. And to kind of put that all into a broader perspective, this is the actual sea surface temperatures for the Gulf of Mexico and part of the Caribbean. And again, we've been talking about kind of just south of this 27 degrees north line here is where we've basically been dealing with most of the heat content that has kind of been stored down here. And we can kind of even further see that in the Bay of Campeche region. Most of the water temperatures now are running roughly at about 29 Celsius, 28 to 29 Celsius, even potentially getting closer there towards 30 Celsius, which again is very warm. And we continue to even notice that even up here across the northern, part of the Gulf of Mexico here, water temperatures are not all that cool. They're still sitting at about 27 Celsius. And again, the kind of scale here goes down to about 25 25.3 degrees, 25.3 degrees, which is right here. That is where the coolest waters are off the part of the Northeast Florida Peninsula. Otherwise than that, even up here, I mean, that, might just be a little bit of kind of, 26, maybe a little bit of 25. But even so, again, these water temperatures are not that cold out here. I mean, they're still a little chilly, yes, per se, depending on, some people's reactions. But if you get a fast-moving, well-developed tropical cyclone that kind of runs up here like that, it's not going to have a lot of time to weaken in this environment. In fact, 27 Celsius is still warm enough for tropical cyclones to maintain itself. Now, upper ocean heat content-wise, again, the best part of the upper ocean heat content is south here of about 27. This is roughly about 25 right here. So it's kind of kept between about 27 and southward is kind of where you have that. But, I mean, even still, I mean, you have, decent upper ocean heat content. And again, a fast-moving cyclone is going to, really not feel the adverse effects of this cooler water. So it's just something to kind of pay attention to as we get closer and closer to what may be developing. And we'll kind of touch on that here in a moment. Looking at the tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center, again, we continue to notice that we don't really have anything to watch at the moment in the Atlantic Basin. However, if we kind of switch gears and we touch on the Eastern Pacific Basin, we have two systems of monitoring here. First of all, Invest Area 92E, which has a 90% chance of developing, although conditions are rapidly becoming unfavorable for additional development. So this may or may not get even get a name. Again, at this point, it may acquire tropical depression status, but that's neither really here nor there. Our attention turns towards this area back out here towards Central America and Mexico, and we talked about this in yesterday's outlook, that this is going to be the area to watch over the next several days for what could be developing down there. And we talked about that it is possible by Thursday or Friday that there will be a well-developed tropical cyclone knocking on the doorstep here of Central America. And this is something that we're going to have to really pay close attention to. And that's why the Hurricane Center is now highlighting this area with a 40% or moderate chance of development over the next 5 days. Looking at the GFS forecast, this is the 12Z run, valid for 2 p.m. this afternoon, 18Z. Again, right now there's not really much to watch, but notice that there's a little bit of a Central American gyre that begins to develop here. This is within about 72 hours from now. This is about 12Z run Wednesday, 8 a.m. Wednesday morning. And you'll notice what happens here is we actually do have a little compact cyclone that is in this area. Again, this is the big Bermuda Azores high that's out here, this being the Azore Islands. Bermuda's right here, so really the Bermuda Azores high out here. And again, you do notice that, yeah, we have a little kind of area of vorticity. This is the 850 millibar vorticity map. They spin in the atmosphere about 5,000 feet off the ground. And there is a closed isobar down here, basically a line of constant pressure. So this is likely close to tropical cyclone genesis at this point, or really status. And you notice that, again, this is 2 p.m. Friday. This is 126 hours from now. This is day 5. So this is pretty much the same day we're talking about here. This is what in all probability could be a hurricane knocking on the doorstep here of Central America by Friday. So this is how important this really is, that yes, there is something to monitor here. Now we can go zoom in here on the western Atlantic side of everything here so we can get a closer and look. Now this is the cyclone here. This is again 18Z on Friday. And curiously enough, we have kind of this other area out here in the Western Atlantic. I'm not really focused on that at the moment, but you'll notice that this eventually does cross over Central America. We kind of notice that this area of vorticity crosses over Central America, and what's left of it dies out here in the mountainous terrain there over Central America and the Yucatan. Now, we do notice, though, that there is a very broad area of cyclonic vorticity that is still around in this area. And whether or not we get something to develop, like, say, down here or up here or over here, or even potentially over in the Eastern Pacific, again, there's a lot of things that we just simply don't know at the moment. And The upper level wind patterns at this time, this is the 200 millibar wind, and it does suggest that, yeah, there is some area of favorability, especially down here across the central and southern part of the Western Caribbean, that, yeah, there is the potential for something to develop down here. The wind patterns do kind of establish themselves fairly well, and this is only about Tuesday. This is about 1 a.m. Tuesday. A very broad upper level anticyclone developing over the Western Caribbean at this time. And if we did have anything in this area, really, yeah, okay, so that's not going to work. Anyway, but by and large, again, we would have a fairly favorable environment. We can just see we don't really have too much here. I mean, 18 knots, but again, that's established within an upper level anticyclone, and some of that is speed shear. But again, the upper level patterns do suggest that they could remain a little bit favorable here. And certainly the sea surface temperatures would be fairly warm at this particular time for there to actually be something. And if we look at the MSLP anomalies coming off the GFS, we do continue to notice that, yeah, there is an area of lower than normal pressures out across this area within the next several days. Now, if we look and transition towards the GFS ensembles, this is the 12Z GFS ensembles. Again, we'll kind of run this forward in time. What we continue to notice is that while there's ridging initially, we can see that we start to get this pattern of lower pressure anomalies out here across the Caribbean and Western Atlantic as a whole. And this leads me to believe that there is some potential there for tropical cyclone genesis. And again, the 200 millibar wind on the GFS, again, very big picture for an upper level anticyclone somewhere within the Western Caribbean. Now, again, most of this right here on the 12Z run is focused generally over Central America. But if this moves kind of, let's just say, a little bit further north, very favorable environment for a tropical cyclone to form and maintain itself in that environment, or further south, again, provides a very favorable environment in the Eastern Pacific. So there's a lot of unknowns there. But looking at the ensemble mean sea level pressure coming off the GFS, again, it does depict that, yeah, like we could be seeing something that tries to develop. You notice that there's an area of lower than normal pressure anomalies that are developing out across here and lower than normal pressures. So this gives me some hints that, you know, we may just have to watch something within the short term, short to kind of medium range, that we'll be looking at something to possibly develop. Now, the European model here, this is the 12Z Euro. Again, it kind of brings on a similar idea. A Central American gyre develops. Now, the one thing that is different from the Euro comparatively to the GFS is that the GFS model has a well-developed tropical cyclone by Friday. This is 12Z Friday on the Euro. You notice that the Euro is much more blah about it. It's not as bullish. And the Central American gyre is a little bit more diffuse on the Euro. But eventually something tries to consolidate here and maybe make its way into the Gulf of Mexico or be a big rain threat nonetheless for parts of Mexico and the Yucatan. Now, the European ensembles, this is again coming off the 6Z run, I believe, or I'm sorry, no, this is the 0Z run. So this is the 0Z ensembles from the Euro. And again, most of them suggest that there could be tropical cyclone activity that tries to develop out here. Again, this is probably some of the strongest signals that we've been seeing over the last several days. The Euro with several sub 1,000 millibar lows here. And even in the Eastern Pacific, there is the potential for development down there as well. So it kind of makes sense. And real quickly, we'll just look at the GEFS ensembles here. And we'll just take a look here at the GFS ensembles and just kind of see what they're predicting. Again, this is also the 0Z run. And you notice that the GFS here isn't as really bullish with it. It develops a lot of tracks mainly down here, a lot of strong tropical cyclone tracks down here, but does kind of bring and raise the alarm bell at least for parts of this area. So we're going to have to monitor that again. Nothing at this time is set in stone, but we'll certainly be monitoring to see the progress of how everything plays out. All right. With that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon, evening. Of course, I am Michael O'Malley. I'll talk to you guys again some more tomorrow.